it can't be. I was explaining to him what causes me to stop in my tracks when he gives his arguments. Okay, I understand this. No, can't be. So he said Sinai, God's revelation at Sinai. In other words, for him, what I believe about Yeshua, what I believe about the nature of God, is in fundamental violation of what God said at Sinai. Therefore, he can't believe it. He can't hold to it. Let's take a look. Deuteronomy 4. This is Moses speaking at the end of the wilderness wanderings. Verse 9. Only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them slip from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb when he said to me, assemble the people before me to hear my words so that they may learn to revere me as long as they live in the land and may teach them to your children. Skip down to verse 15. You saw no form of any kind the day Yahweh spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourselves an idol. Now look at this, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman, or like any animal on earth, or any bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the waters below. And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord your God has apportioned to all the nations under heaven. Verse 25. This is immediately after saying, Yahweh our God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. After you have had children and grandchildren and have lived in the land a long time, if you then become corrupt and make any idol, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God and provoking him to anger, I call heaven and earth as witnesses against you this day that you will quickly perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You will not live there long, but will certainly be destroyed. I want to read again, beginning at verse 15. You saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore watch yourselves very carefully, so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourselves an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman, or like any animal on earth, or any bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the waters below. The reasoning would then be, if we attribute deity to Yeshua, say he bears the divine nature, say that he's God in the flesh, say any of those things, that we are then worshiping God in the form of a man. And we are guilty of this revelation where God said, the whole reason you didn't see anything, when he came down, they didn't see some giant goat or some giant elephant or some giant man. You didn't see any of that. The reason was so that you wouldn't go and make an idol. Of course, the answer to that is very simple. New Testament writers made the same point. No one's seen God. We don't worship the form of a man any more than the children of Israel worshiped the form of fire or worship the form of a tabernacle. We still have not seen the substance and the essence of God. He still remains invisible, even though he reveals himself to us through his Son. We do not make statues and idols of the flesh of Jesus and say, this is God, and bow down to a physical form of a man. That to us would be idolatry. Just like this. Now, something very interesting, which is as emphatically as God says this here. It says in Numbers 12:8 that Moses, who had special access to God, that Moses saw the form of the Lord. It's a very interesting verse. Same Hebrew word, tmunah, form. I asked the rabbi, I said, doesn't that trouble you a little bit? With the whole point you're making that it says Moses saw his form. God says here you didn't see any form to the nation, yet Moses saw his form. I wonder what that means. And the psalmist says in 17:15, speaking of his death, when he dies, he's going to see the form of the Lord. Just curious, just wonder what that means. It's raising a little question. We're going to come to the question in a moment. What happens in the Bible where people saw God? Where it explicitly says they saw God. Where else where it says he can't be seen? Exact same thing that we say in terms of Yeshua. No, when you look at him, you are not physically looking at God. No one can see God. This is a fleshly tabernacle in which God is dwelling. John 1:14, he pitched his tent among us. No more than you worship the form of the tabernacle do you worship the form of this man. Nothing idolatrous in the concept. But when it says in Numbers 12 that Moses saw the form of the Lord, I wonder what he saw. I wonder what was revealed to him. Just put a little question mark there. And I've read Deuteronomy and I feel the force of it. Okay, don't make an idol in the form of an animal, in the form of a man. Correct. We don't make an idol in the form of a man, and we don't worship the form of a man, and we don't bow down to the flesh and blood of Messiah. There is zero evidence that any of his first followers, his Jewish followers, made statues or pictures or said, this is God. Let's hold on to this form and picture and bow down to it. No, they continued to worship the invisible God. No violation here whatsoever of Sinai. If you think of it wrongly, it can hit as a violation. If you think of it rightly, no violation whatsoever. Yeah, but hang on. What about the verses that explicitly say that God is not a man? Numbers 23:19, God is not a man that he should lie, or a mere human being that he should change his mind. Same context in 1 Samuel 15:29. God's not a man that he's going to lie and be fickle. Yes, correct. God is not a man. God is the eternal, unseen, invisible creator of the universe, who also has the power to reveal himself and walk among us while remaining unseen, invisible God in heaven. God did not become a man and cease to be God in heaven. Rather, God's eternal Son pitched his tent among us and walked among us. And Yeshua continued to refer to his Father as his God and our God. You say, well, doesn't that deny some Trinity and the deity of Jesus? No. It denies a wrong understanding of it, not a right understanding of it. So let me back up and say a few things. The Torah quite plainly forbids worship of any other God, and that is explicitly reiterated by the prophets and explicitly reiterated in the New Covenant writings. We worship no other God but one. In fact, let me show you something. At the end of this all, in the book of Revelation, I'm going to get ahead of myself, but in Revelation chapter 22, look at what's written there. Beginning in verse 1, then the angel showed me the river of the water of life as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb. Down the middle of the great street of the city, on each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. Notice this, the throne of God and of the Lamb, speaking of the Messiah, will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever. We will worship one God forever and ever. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. And this is the same book that explicitly identifies the Messiah with God himself, both of whom are Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. So, the scriptures, Tanakh, New Covenant, explicitly state we worship